Welcome to the 8th episode in our video series. I'm Dr. David Van Nuys, co-author with Michael Kelleher of the book This Is The Zodiac Speaking, Into the Mind of a Serial Killer. By now I'm going to assume that you've seen my previous 7 YouTube installments. If you haven't, you should go back and see them first. Thanks to all of you who posted comments to keep going, so I will. Now, rather than going over one of the Zodiac's letters today, I want to take you through what he is reported to have said in his most bizarre attack of all. Once again, as in the previous ones, he attacks a young couple, this time at Lake Baryessa in Napa County, California. Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell are described as close friends and schoolmates at a nearby college. And they're off on a picnic blanket near Lake Baryessa, and as depicted in the movie, the Zodiac comes up over a small rise, and he's in a frightening and outlandish getup, with a box-like mask over his head and a chest plate with his signature Zodiac symbol kind of on the chest, which is part of the mask. He has a gun and a knife with a scabbard on his belt, and he's also holding a coil of plastic clothesline, and he orders Cecilia to tie up Brian first, and then he proceeds to tie up Cecilia. Now, the following conversation is based on Brian's recollections, who amazingly survived this attack. So first, the Zodiac says, "I want your car to go to Mexico. Time's running short. I'm an escaped convict from Deer Lodge, Montana. I've killed a prison guard there. I have a stolen car and nothing to lose. I'm flat broke." Okay, now this seems to be a cover story that does not carry a great deal of significance with it. However, there is a prison in Deer Lodge, Montana, and it's an interesting and convincing little detail that he's thrown in here, so we have to wonder what that means. It's so concrete and so far from most people's associations that one has to wonder where the Zodiac came up with it and whether or not maybe he's had some contact with that prison or certainly with Montana. And it's a strange dialogue. On the one hand, Zodiac seems to be telling his story to account for his presence, his weapons, and his appearance. He also seems to be trying to put his victims at ease by giving them a way to understand the bizarre and threatening situation that he's created for them. However, telling them that he had killed a prison guard doesn't seem like that would put them much at ease. There may have been a hidden motive here. Zodiac may have been worried about the possibility of Brian Hartnell fighting back, so he took measures to intimidate the young man by letting him know that he was a murderer and a fugitive with nothing to lose. He always seems to attack the male first, which may suggest that in fact he's afraid of the males. He goes on to say, "Just don't start playing here on me. Don't try to grab the gun." Now, once again, this statement suggests that Zodiac was nervous about the possibility of a direct face-to-face confrontation with Brian. At the same time, you have to wonder about why he was concerned, why he would be concerned about the couple trying to grab the gun, since he clearly had it in his possession, he was in charge of the situation, and he could have easily shot them. The Zodiac most likely knew that he was going to kill them anyway. This makes it clear that just shooting the couple would not be enough for Zodiac. He could have done that right away and disappeared with the whole cover story. So evidently he wanted to toy with them, or else there was some symbolic satisfaction that needed to happen here by taking control of them. I think that's really what it's about. We see a lot of evidence that he needs to be in control. The next thing he says is, "Lie face down on the ground. I'm going to have to tie you up." Now, the Zodiac says, "I'm going to have to tie you up," as if this action was due to circumstances that were somehow beyond his control. This bespeaks of the compulsive nature of the crime to me, that Zodiac feels driven by an inner yet alien force that he can't control. Zodiac, he then ties them up. He wants them to be helpless and under his control. Perhaps a different killer would have used that kind of control to humiliate his victims or to sexually abuse them or to dominate them or perhaps to torture them. Zodiac doesn't do any of these things. In my opinion, he immobilizes them so that they can't fight back and also to exert control over them. And then he was driven to penetrate their bodies with his knife over and over again. And my impression is that this repeated penetration probably expresses not only deep rage, but perhaps is also tinged by some sexual expression. The next thing he says is, "You tie the boy up." He says that to Cecilia. So here Zodiac gives more evidence that he fears the male victim. Also notice that once again he refers to the male victim as the boy, indicating that he clearly sees himself as significantly older than his victim. The next thing he says is, "I'm getting nervous." And this feeling of nervousness could be interpreted as the visceral sensation of Zodiac's compulsion stirring deeply within him. It also puts me in mind of the sensation that sometimes occurs immediately before a seizure, the intimation that something is stirring in the brain. Now, my co-author has a somewhat different comment at this point, that he thinks that the Zodiac was probably very apprehensive given that he was operating in public. The next thing he says is, "I'm going to have to stab you people." I'm going to have to stab you people. Strange. Here's more evidence of compulsion. For all we know, Zodiac may have been hearing the voice of God or some demon commanding him to stab his victims, although there's no evidence of that. However, he's definitely communicating to the young couple that he has this feeling of compulsion, that there's something driving him that's outside of his own volition. And it's at this point that Brian Hartnell does the noble thing and asks to be stabbed first, to which the Zodiac replies chillingly, "I'll do just that," and proceeds to stab him 7 times. Now, is this an act of kindness or an act of retribution that the Zodiac complies? This is possible confirmation that the Zodiac feared his male victim more than the female. Maybe he would have gone for Brian first anyway. The Zodiac's voice, by the way, is throughout the encounter is described as calm and a monotone. This is in marked contrast to the violence that he then enacts by stabbing his victims repeatedly. We've all met individuals who project an exterior calm while they're seething inside. Then at some point they snap. Perhaps Zodiac was trying to exert some control over himself. That attempted control may have been apparent in his calm voice. However, he ultimately failed and gave in to the fury within himself. Brian asks to be stabbed first. Zodiac stabs him 7 times. Then he stabs Cecilia even more savagely and much more often. Now, after the killing, he drives 27 miles to the town of Napa and calls the police, just 5 blocks from the police station. So once again, here's evidence of this compulsion to taunt, to be the one in control. So I hope you'll watch for subsequent episodes in which I'll continue to move through the Zodiac material. And if you're interested in psychology, be sure to check out my podcast series, Shrink Rap Radio. You'll find it at www.shrinkrapradio.com. Until next time.